Hi, everyone. My name is Nancy Mader, and I am the Director of Transition Services for the Federation for Children with Special Needs and the Director of the Link Center, which is our transition center. Today, I am presenting with Leslie, the Director of our MassPAC project, and we're going to be doing a basic rights series around transition planning. So, part one will be today, and I'm going to let Leslie introduce herself quickly.
Hi, I'm Leslie. I've been at the Federation for about 9 years, working on MassPAC, which supports special education parent advisory councils, and also working with Nancy on transition, because transition is so important for all of our families. Thanks, Nancy.
You're welcome. Thank you. So let's get started. So we talked a bit about the Link Center, which is our transition center, and we also have a parent training and information center. And actually the Federation is a parent training and information center for the state of Massachusetts. We do numerous trainings around the state, around basic rights. We do parent advocacy trainings, and you can get more information at our website around everything that we do, and that is fcsn.org.
And just so families know, this is a very special series to allow families to access all of this basic rights information in shorter components. So we've divided each one of our 2-hour presentations into a 4-part workshop. And today we'll be doing part one, talking about legal rights and why transition is so important for families.
So Leslie is the lawyer out of the two of us, so I'm going to let her do most of the talking, and I'm going to chime in here and there. So this is what the 4-part series will look like. So today we're starting with the legal aspect. So Leslie, go ahead.
I'll just jump right in. We really love the purpose statement under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act. Massachusetts had the first special ed law in the state, and the federal government pulled it in and established IDEA. And the whole purpose of this federal law is to ensure that all children with disabilities, regardless of your disability type, have available to them that free and appropriate public education, which we call FAPE. It emphasizes what special education really is, that instruction and related services that are designed to meet the unique needs of a student. That's why we have an individualized education plan, or an IEP. It's individualized to the needs of that student. And why are we doing all of this? It's really to prepare all students for further education, employment, and independent living. That's life after high school. So all of our public schooling is with a focus on how do we get our students the skills that they need to be important skills that they need to be functioning citizens in our communities.
Right, to the best of their ability.
So it's grounded in the law, and this is where, I love the fact that we have these rights and they're protected. Not only in IDEA, beginning in 1990, they required transition services, and those services are going to look different on every student because it's individualized. But they have the right to have families work with an IEP team to plan for what are the services that are going to happen in school. That's also embedded in our state law, Chapter 71B. We're also going to be talking later on in the series about Chapter 688, which is our Turning 22 law. This was driven by families to make sure that the dollars are there available, so when a student ages out of the public school system at 22, they have funding for whether they're eligible to enter into the adult services world. Another law that surrounds all of this and supports a student as they work in school and in their communities is the Rehab Act of 1973, and that's where those 504 rights are. They carry with them all the time, whether they're on an IEP or 504 plan. If you're documented with a disability, you have the right to reasonable accommodations at post-secondary schools, community colleges, or even in the workplace, the right to access the services and the environment. And the last law that is going to be woven in through these 4-part series is the Workforce Innovative and Opportunity Act. And that is a reauthorized support of employment for young people. And what it's doing is driving federal dollars into the state under the Vocational Rehab Act, and asking that now our state Mass Rehab Commission support students in high school around job exploration and experiences. And Nancy's the expert on that, so I'll let her talk about that.
Right, right. So you'll be hearing about, we call it WIOA. And then what more specifically, we'll be talking about the pre-ETS programs, the pre-employment transition services programs through the Massachusetts Rehabilitation Commission. So who is eligible for transition services? So under this part 1, we're going to talk about the law and what your rights are under transition. And in the next one, we're going to talk about vision and how it should look a little bit more specifically around your student. But in Massachusetts, students who are 14 are eligible for transition services. So in the federal law, it's 16. So we're a little bit ahead of some of the other states and the federal government in that way. I mean, personally, I wish it started at like 12 because I don't think it's long enough, especially if your student's going to graduate with a regular high school diploma. Do you agree, Leslie?
I was just saying that this is great because it allows families, while students in middle school, to kind of start planning what is high school going to look like. It's prior to them entering the high school that the planning is going to take place, and we can set the student on the right track. Right. So it takes place in the IEP where the student is going to be in effect when the student is 14. So the student can be 13, right, planning an IEP that's going to take place the next month when they turn 14. So let's give the most planning time possible. So you can always do it earlier if it's appropriate.
Right. And I think you should do it earlier if you can. If you're listening to this webinar right now and you have a 12-year-old, 11-year-old, start thinking about transition services. So what is transition planning? So we use all of these, these terms like academic and non-academic courses, other services, employment and related training opportunities. And so we're going to describe those a little bit further in the next couple of slides, just to give you an idea around the terminology that's used in the law and what we're always, people who are training, like Leslie and I, are always using these terms. And it's not helpful if you don't understand what it looks like. So
but all of the services that a student would be receiving under transition is based on these 3 terms that come out of IDEA: education, right, employment, and independent living. And they all will be woven into the plan that the IEP team will create for the student around transition based on that vision.
Right. So non-academic and academic courses. So, the point of high school is for students to graduate with a high school diploma, and that's not the case for everyone, but that should be what the first 4 years of high school concentrate on. How do we get this student to meet all of the requirements to accept a regular high school diploma? And so they should be focusing on academic courses that the district requires of them, if this is possible. And then they should have also classes that meet their interests. So if someone is interested in being a chef for, their life after high school, if they don't know what being a chef means, taking cooking classes, participating in home economics classes, so they can get a better under that.
So I just wanted to let people know the tip on the bottom there is to let families know that you should know what it would require for a student to graduate and get a diploma. Now, not every student is going to get a diploma, but the state has specific requirements that you need to pass MCAS here in Massachusetts, get a competency determination to be able to graduate. You also need to fulfill your local requirements. And so as families start to plan around the academics that their students will access during the transition planning period, that they should know, what would it take for my student to get a diploma and to graduate? And have that information available, because it helps you plan the course of study.
Absolutely. I think it's really important for you to know this information as your student is entering high school. So look at your handbook if you have students who are just going into high school. So employment and training. For students age 14 to 22, the team should discuss employment objectives. Employment should be talked about during the IEP meeting. So you should ask what part of their vision is employment. I'm at home, if everyone can hear my kids in the background. I'm trying to speak over them. I've asked them to be quiet like 100 times. Anyway, employment is a really, really important part of transition. Preparing kids on any level. If your student who's going to graduate might not get a job right after high school, might not go to college right after high school, they can still develop really important skills in high school, such as soft skills, how to apply for a job, because it's really hard. Online applications are hard for everyone. So learning how to answer those questions and learning how to, dress for a job, all of those things are things that can be taken care of, or at least started, so it's not such a, guessing game when they leave high school. So they have some skills around that while they're there, and they can explore different jobs through classes, through the pre-eds programs under Mass Rehab, through volunteering, through the school. There's so many different options for students to, look at training, look at employment while in.
And I don't think families know that they have the legal right to talk about employment in an IEP meeting. It's on the PLEP B page of your IEP that once a student turns 16, that if that's part of what they want to do when they exit high school, it's okay to talk about employment. I love the last tip here, really focusing on the student should know their own challenges around working and learning, and be able to talk about their disability, not only at a school, a college, or in a workplace. Is that disability disclosure is something that students have to learn, and they can practice in high school. It's a great opportunity to work with their educators in high school to talk about their learning challenges and how they can do better in those classes.
Right.
And then how it relates to work, we know that's so important.
Right. And then, what I'm always talking about is informed choice. You can want to be something in IT because you like computers, but if you don't know what IT looks like in the real world, then how do you make an informed choice about college or work? So helping students explore at every point that they can, so they can make informed choices about their future.
I think it's really driving in this planning process to get students to have the most experiences as possible so that they can make those choices for themselves. The power of the student being involved in this process is really key. All students at age 14 should be attending. They're invited to the IEP meeting by law, and they should attend for at least a portion of that meeting to provide some input to the team. Absolutely.
They're your best informant. They're your best piece of information. They can tell you what's working and what's not working.
This is Nancy's favorite slide here, all about getting involved in the community.
Getting involved in the community. I think about transition like a retirement plan, building a community around your students so when they leave high school, their life doesn't end. Their social life doesn't end. Their recreation doesn't end. Their education doesn't end. That you've built that we as a community have built around them supports for them to have lifelong and to meet new people and to go new places, so that it doesn't all end with high school graduation or aging out at age 22. So these are things for you to think about and start mapping out, what's important in their life. If they're the manager of the basketball team or they play basketball, and when high school ends, that ends for them, how do they get involved in a rec league or, whatever it is, start thinking about those things. Health, medical health, transitioning doctors, transitioning therapists to adult therapists, all of those things change, and they shouldn't all change with high school ending. And so that's kind of what we're trying to put out there. You can't, even though for some of us, everything changed when we turned 18 and stopped going to high school. We don't want that for our students where they already have enough challenges, so trying to ease some of those paths while they're in high school, if it's changing doctors before they leave for college or, whatever it is, this is what we're trying to get you to think about here.
But families can also involve a larger group in the planning of this, the community people that students are going to be integrating with. If a student has a strength around, say, singing, there's no reason why they can't get involved in a community group, as well as their
Absolutely.
high school chorus. It's using the strengths that the student has, building on their interests, building on their likes, and then making that part of this whole thing so that when they do move into the community, they have connections and they have some direction. It may change. We know that
Right.
students change all the time, but it's looking at the student holistically and helping others to kind of get on board and support that student.
Yep. The more community involvement, the better in my view. Leslie, you want to take this slide?
Sure. We know that the graduation rate for students on IEPs is less than all students. There's a big gap. These students have barriers, and that's why they're on an IEP, and we should always look at what's the biggest barrier for that student to succeed and try to address that in the IEP goals. The student will not have a transition goal. Transition should be embedded throughout the whole IEP, and it really is, what are the skills that student needs to succeed in their vision? And we need to have the IEP focused skill level, and then students then build the most skills as possible. Because not only are they not graduating, if you switch to the next slide, they are either unemployed or underemployed. And that provides a very challenging barrier for students to live independently. So we need to use the high school years to do transition planning to get the students to have the most skills as possible, so that when they move into the adult world, they're much more able to access not only jobs. A student who has a job, a paying job in high school, is the biggest indicator of success after high school. And we're looking at the statistics, and it's pretty sad. So we need to really work on transition and make it work for our students.
Well, I think, so I am a vocational rehabilitation counselor, and I, have been doing that for 15 years. And these numbers haven't changed. And that's why we're talking more about transition, because if we can better prepare our young people with disabilities in high school, actually all of our young people, disabilities or not, transition should be a part of their lives as well. But if we, if we can prepare them better for leaving for high school, maybe we can change some of these numbers, because they've been the same for over 20 years. And that's not good for our young people. So transition is important for the lifelong health of our young people with disabilities.
So we're coming to the end of part one. I'm going to cover a couple more slides that are a little bit more general, and I hope that you continue on and access the other three parts of our workshop here. We want families to realize that as you're doing this transition planning, you always have the right to disagree with your team and to work it out. At the Federation, we always recommend that you sit down and ask for another team meeting to work with your school over some of the disagreements that you might have. But you can see that there's a continuum of due process rights that you have, not only talking to your state Department of Education around procedural violations, but you can ask others to come in and help facilitate the dispute, the disagreement. I found mediation to be a really great tool to bring two sides together to come to an agreement. But when you see that red, you should stop and say, maybe this is where I need an attorney, because these are formal legal proceedings. A BSEA hearing is a legal proceeding, and that's where we ask that families get some legal support around that.
I'll do this one here, staying informed about transition. So we have a Federation transition listserv, which is a wealth of information about things going on statewide around transition. That could be free trainings, youth groups, changes in programs. It can be so many different things. We are also a part of the Massachusetts Transition to Adulthood Facebook page, which is a group you have to ask to join. It is great conversations that happen on there, a wealth of information. People across the state post things that are going on in their region. You can post a question on how you handle things around specific disabilities or specific programming. So there's a lot of different information out there. Our website is, organized in a way to help you find as much information as possible. We also do linked over lunch videos once a month, and they are on our website. They cover only transition topics like assessment, ABLE accounts, the MACI program, MRC pre-ETs, so many different topics. They're 20 minutes or less. You can listen to them and get great information that can help to better inform you on top of what you're listening to now. It's like they're subsidizing what you're listening to now and giving you a little bit more detail around these topics. And then the DESE website is always something that you should go to for, their outlook and their point of view on things and the information that they're putting out.
So here's a couple resources that you can access. The Family Guide to Transition Service is a little booklet. You can actually work with your student and work through it so that they understand the process. The more we involve the young person in the planning process, the more buy-in and feedback that we get all along. So that's, I think, really, really important. We're going to talk a little bit later about the transition planning form and how it helps guide that IEP meeting, things that we need to consider in our planning process. Nancy, if you saw on some of the slides, has put together brochures on a lot of the advisories that the Department of Ed has put out and puts it in a little bit more family-friendly language. Those are all on the website. A lot of them are in other languages so that you can access those just by going to the Federation's Link Center website.
And here's more information around our Parent Training and Information Center. Visit our website, you guys. If you have more questions, all of these can be answered there. In this current COVID-19 crisis, our call center is still open. You can get the form there. So if you listen to this podcast or this webinar and you think, oh, I have more questions, fill out the form and have someone call you back. But Leslie and I are going to sign off on this one, and hopefully you will be listening to part 2.